The massive chamber of the Galactic Council had never been this quiet. Ambassador Kelvith stood at the center podium, his blue scales shimmering under the bright lights as thousands of alien representatives watched him. His hands shook as he held up a small device containing the strangest signal anyone had ever received. "Fellow council members," Kelvith began, his voice echoing through the vast hall. 3 days ago, our deep space monitoring stations picked up this transmission from a distant star system called Sol. At first, we thought it was just another primitive species trying to make contact. He activated the device, and mathematical equations filled the holographic display above them. But these weren't ordinary numbers. The equations seemed to bend and twist space around them, creating tiny gravitational waves that made several delegates feel dizzy. "This is impossible," whispered Dr. Zelton from the science committee. "No known species can embed gravitational fields into simple mathematics." Kelvith nodded grimly. "That's not even the strangest part. The signal comes from what we've classified as a Class 12 death world. These planets are considered completely uninhabitable by any reasonable standard." The chamber erupted in confused chatter. A Class 12 rating meant a world so hostile that even the toughest known species would die within hours of landing. These planets had crushing gravity that would flatten most beings, weather systems that could level cities, and ecosystems filled with creatures that could hunt and kill anything. "Surely you're mistaken," said Council Leader Nethes, her 4 eyes blinking rapidly. "No intelligent life could evolve on such a nightmare world. These must be old emergency beacons from some failed colony attempt." But Kelvith shook his head. "That's what we thought too. So we sent our fastest scout ship to investigate." Captain Vorth had been exploring unknown space for over 30 years. He'd seen gas giants with diamond rain, worlds made entirely of crystal, and systems where time moved differently. But nothing had prepared him for what he found when his ship approached the 3rd planet of the Sol system. "Captain," called out his navigator, Lieutenant Porix, "the electromagnetic interference is off the charts. One solar flare from their star could fry every system on our ship." Through the view screen, Earth looked beautiful from a distance. Blue oceans, white clouds, green and brown continents. But their sensors told a different story. The planet was a death trap. "Look at these readings," said Science Officer Palnick, staring at his instruments in disbelief. "The gravity is 3 times what most of our species can handle. The atmosphere has oxygen levels that would be toxic to half the galaxy. And those storm systems, some of them are generating more energy than our entire fleet." Captain Vorth studied the data carefully. This planet should be empty, dead. Nothing should be able to survive down there, let alone build a civilization advanced enough to send mathematical signals through space. Sir Palnick's voice became very quiet. "I'm detecting life signs, eh? Few scattered survivors, maybe?" asked the captain hopefully. "No, sir. Billions of them. And they're not hiding in underground bunkers or protective domes. They're living openly across the entire surface of the planet." The bridge crew stared at their screens in shock. The thermal scans showed massive cities sprawling across continents. Millions of vehicles moved along transportation networks. Ships crossed the violent oceans. Flying machines soared through skies filled with dangerous weather. "They're not just surviving down there," whispered Palnick. "They're thriving. They've built a global civilization on a world that should have killed them all." Captain Vorth felt a chill run through his body. In all his years of exploration, he'd never encountered anything like this. Most species evolved on peaceful worlds, with gentle weather and abundant resources. They developed technology slowly, carefully, always focused on comfort and safety. But these beings had evolved in hell itself. Every day of their existence was a battle against their own planet. Their technology wasn't built for comfort. It was built for survival against impossible odds. "Captain," said Lieutenant Porix nervously, "what do we do?" Vorth stared at the planet below, watching billions of unknown beings go about their daily lives on a world that would kill him in minutes. We report back to the Council immediately. The galaxy needs to know what we've found. The scout ship turned and jumped to hyperspace, carrying news that would change everything. The galaxy was about to meet its first Deathworlders, and nothing would ever be the same again. The docking bay of the massive Council station buzzed with nervous energy as the human transport ship slowly approached. Medical teams stood ready with emergency equipment, expecting to help another fragile alien species adapt to station conditions. Dr. Yelith, the station's chief medical officer, had treated thousands of different species over her career. She thought she'd seen everything. Then Jake Morrison walked off the ship. The first thing that struck everyone was how he moved. While most alien diplomats needed assistance adjusting to the station's artificial gravity, Jake strolled down the ramp like he was taking a casual walk through a park. His movements were smooth and confident, but there was something unsettling about the way he carried himself. Like a predator that knew it was the strongest thing in the room. "Welcome to Council Station Alpha," Dr. Yelith said, approaching with her medical scanner already running. "We'll need to run some basic compatibility tests before you can meet with the diplomatic corps." Jake nodded politely. "No problem, Doc. Just let me know what you need." The scanner beeped, then started making alarmed, chirping sounds. Dr. Yelith stared at the readings, her face turning pale. She ran the scanner again, thinking it must be malfunctioning. "Is everything okay?" Jake asked, noticing her expression. "Your bone density," Dr. Yelith whispered. It's impossible. These readings suggest your skeleton could support nearly 10 times your body weight. Most of our species would be crushed flat by bones this heavy." Jake looked confused. "Really? I mean, I've never thought of my bones as particularly strong. Back home, we have athletes who are way tougher than me." The doctor's hands trembled as she continued the scan. "Your muscle fiber density is off the charts. According to this, your casual movements generate enough force to literally pulverize a Xanthary's exoskeleton." "Huh," Jake said thoughtfully. "I guess growing up on Earth does build you up pretty good. The gravity there is just normal to us. You know, what Jake called normal gravity was 3 times stronger than what most galactic species could survive." Dr. Yelith realized that this human had spent his entire life exercising under conditions that would kill her in minutes. The welcome feast that evening became a disaster from the moment. Jake sat down. The diplomatic chef had prepared what they considered a mildly spiced dish to accommodate different alien palates. Jake took a bite and complimented the flavor while the scanner readings showed. He was consuming something that registered as industrial cleaning solvent. "This is delicious," Jake said, taking another bite. "Reminds me of the salsa my grandmother used to make, though hers was a lot spicier." 3 nearby delegates immediately moved to different tables, worried that even the fumes from Jake's food might harm them. During casual conversation, Jake mentioned recovering from something called chickenpox as a child. The galactic database showed that a similar virus had wiped out the entire Mauryan civilization 2,000 years ago, killing billions in a matter of weeks. "Oh yeah, most kids on Earth get that," Jake explained cheerfully. "You're usually sick for about a week, then you're immune for life. No big deal." Ambassador Quillith, from the Peaceful Collective, nearly choked on his drink. "You intentionally expose your children to deadly plagues." "Well, we have vaccines now, but back in the day, parents would actually have pox parties to make sure all the kids got it while they were young. Better to get it over with, you know?" The conversation got worse when someone asked about Jake's fitness routine. He casually described running several miles every morning, lifting weights that would require industrial machinery for most species to move, and practicing something called martial arts, where humans deliberately fought each other for fun, double quotes you, ... "You fight for entertainment," gasped Dr. Telexon from the Cultural Exchange. "Sure, It's great exercise. I do kickboxing twice a week. Nothing too serious, just enough to stay in shape. The next day, Ambassador Lisa Thompson arrived with what she cheerfully called care packages from home. She distributed small wrapped items to various delegates as diplomatic gifts. These are chocolate bars, Lisa explained. They're really popular comfort food back on Earth. Kids love them. Within minutes, 3 delegates were in the medical bay. The harmless candy that human children ate regularly contained compounds that acted like powerful stimulants to alien nervous systems. One delegate experienced such severe hyperactivity that they had to be sedated. Emergency protocols were immediately enacted. All human food items were classified as potentially hazardous materials requiring special handling permits. You give these to your offspring regularly? Dr. Uleth asked Lisa in amazement. Oh yeah, chocolate is pretty mild. Wait until you see what we put in our coffee. By the end of the first week, the entire station had been restructured around the human presence. Special safety protocols were established. Hazmat teams stood by during meal times. The medical bay expanded its emergency facilities. The galaxy was beginning to understand that they weren't dealing with just another spacefaring species. These humans had evolved in conditions so harsh that their normal daily activities were considered extreme survival scenarios by galactic standards, and somehow, they thought all of this was perfectly normal. The research vessel Harmony was supposed to be on a peaceful scientific mission. Captain Geltek had been looking forward to 3 weeks of quiet data collection in the Outer Rim systems. His crew of Meridian scientists were studying ancient stellar formations, and they'd brought along 3 human researchers as part of the new cultural exchange program. Everything changed when the pirate ships appeared. Captain, we have 5 vessels approaching fast, reported Navigation Officer Pelix, his voice tight with fear. They're flying Shadowclaw banners. Captain Geltek felt his heart sink. The Shadowclaw pirates were notorious throughout this sector. They were known for taking prisoners and selling them to the slave markets in the lawless zones. His small research ship had no weapons, no military escorts, and no chance of outrunning the pirates' modified fighters. Prepare for surrender. Protocols, Geltek announced to his crew. Lock down all sensitive data and gather in the main corridor. If we cooperate, maybe they'll just take our supplies and leave us alive. The Meridian crew began following standard procedures for pirate encounters. They'd all been trained for this possibility. Surrender quickly, don't resist, hope for the best. It was the same strategy used by most peaceful species across the galaxy, but the 3 humans aboard had different ideas. Dr. Mike Davis was in the ship's hydroponic bay, calmly examining the plants while sirens wailed throughout the vessel. The human botanist seemed completely unconcerned by the approaching pirates. Don't worry about it, Mike said when Captain Geltek found him. We've got this. Dr. Davis, you don't understand, Geltek said urgently. These are Shadowclaw pirates. They're extremely dangerous. We need to surrender immediately. Mike just shrugged and started pulling equipment from storage lockers. Nah, we'll be fine. Tom, you getting the power system sorted? From across the ship, Engineer Tom Bradley's voice came over the communicator. Almost done rerouting the gravity generators. Rachel, how's the communication analysis coming? Dr. Rachel Green, the team's linguist, was at the communications console with headphones on, listening intently to the pirates' chatter. Got their language patterns mapped. These guys are using old Draknari military codes, but they're making some interesting grammatical errors that suggest limited education and possible psychological stress responses. Captain Geltek stared at the 3 humans in confusion. While his crew prepared for capture or death, the humans were talking like they were setting up a routine experiment. What are you doing? He asked desperately. Solving a problem, Mike said simply. Now connecting strange devices to the hydroponic system's nutrient pumps. The pirates boarded exactly 12 minutes later, The Shadowclaw boarding party expected to find cowering scientists huddled in corridors. Instead, they walked into what could only be described as an elaborate trap. Mike had turned the ship's peaceful garden into a weapon. He'd modified the growth accelerator's devices designed to gently nurture plants into high-pressure projectile launchers. Seeds and plant matter became ammunition, fired at velocities that could knock armored pirates unconscious. Tom had done something even more creative with the artificial gravity system. As the pirates moved through the ship's corridors, they found themselves suddenly experiencing crushing gravitational forces in some areas and complete weightlessness in others. Pirates who'd been confidently marching forward were suddenly pinned to the floor by forces 3 times stronger than their homeworld's gravity. But it was Rachel who truly broke them. The linguist had analyzed the pirates' communication patterns and identified their leader, Captain Vec. Using techniques she'd learned during her doctoral studies in psychological linguistics, she began speaking to him over the ship's intercom system. "Captain Vexstar," Rachel said in perfect Drachnary, "your speech patterns indicate you're from the industrial colonies of Zephyr Prime. Judging by your grammatical structure, you probably grew up in the lower districts, didn't you?" The pirate captain, trapped under artificial gravity and covered in plant matter, could only grunt in response. "Your crew is using outdated military codes," Rachel continued conversationally. "That suggests you're all former military, probably discharged after the Zephyr Rebellion failed. You turned to piracy because you felt abandoned by the government you served." "How do you know this?" Vexstar gasped. "Language tells us everything about a person," Rachel explained. "For instance, the way you just asked that question shows you're feeling vulnerable and confused. You're used to being in control, but now you're realizing you've made a terrible mistake attacking this ship." Within minutes, Rachel had the entire pirate crew questioning their life choices, using nothing but words and psychological insights. She convinced them that they were in way over their heads and should surrender immediately. The whole fight lasted 12 minutes from start to finish. Captain Jeltak stood in his own corridor, staring at 3 humans who had just defeated notorious pirates using gardening equipment, engineering creativity, and psychology. His crew was safe. The pirates were voluntarily surrendering, and the humans were already discussing getting back to their research. "How did you do that?" he whispered. Mike was cleaning plant matter off his equipment. "Do what?" "We just used what we had available." "But you violated 17 different galactic warfare conventions." Tom looked up from where he was resetting the gravity generators. "We did." "Which ones?" "Weaponizing civilian equipment, using psychological warfare against enemies, creating improvised gravity traps." Jeltak's voice trailed off. Rachel shrugged. "We didn't know there were rules about that stuff. We just solved the problem with what we had." As news of the incident spread throughout the galaxy, military strategists realized they had a serious problem. Their entire understanding of warfare was based on the assumption that scientists were harmless, that civilian equipment couldn't be weaponized, and that psychological tactics required specialized training. The humans had just proven that all of these assumptions were completely wrong. Combat manuals were immediately rewritten across the galaxy, and a new warning was issued to pirates everywhere: avoid ships carrying human passengers at all costs. The Great Galactic Trade Center on Nexus Prime had seen its share of unusual products over the centuries: exotic crystals that sang when touched, metals that could repair themselves, even flowers that could predict weather patterns. But nothing had prepared the galaxy's merchants for what happened when humans started trading. It all began with something humans called coffee. Merchant Captain Crixel thought he'd stumbled onto the deal of a lifetime when Ambassador Jake Morrison offered to share some of Earth's most popular beverages. Jake had mentioned that billions of humans consumed coffee daily, making it one of their most important trade goods. "It's just a simple hot drink," Jake had explained casually. "Helps people wake up in the morning and stay alert during the day." Captain Crixel eagerly agreed to test market the product across several systems. Within a week, he was facing criminal charges. The first incident happened on Centauri Station, when a vegan trader tried a small cup of what humans considered mild morning coffee. Within minutes, the usually calm, philosophical vegan was running through the station corridors at impossible speeds, speaking so rapidly that translator systems couldn't keep up, and attempting to reorganize the entire cargo bay by himself. Medical teams had to sedate him. Similar incidents occurred across 6 different systems. The Crystalline Collective experienced what they described as temporal acceleration syndrome after trying coffee. The Peaceful Harmony folk became hyperactive to the point where they started composing symphonies at superhuman speed. Even worse, 2 members of the slug-like Tranquil Order actually moved fast enough to be seen with the naked eye, something that hadn't happened in their species. Recorded history. Emergency medical bulletins went out across the galaxy. Coffee was immediately classified as a controlled substance, requiring hazmat certification, protective equipment for handlers, and special permits for transport. Jake seemed genuinely confused when officials explained the situation to him. "But it's just coffee," he said. "My 5-year-old niece drinks it sometimes." "Well, okay. We usually mix it with milk and sugar for kids, but still, the fact that humans regularly gave this controlled substance to their children sent shockwaves through Galactic Child Protection Services." Meanwhile, Merchant Prince Phalanx was facing his own crisis. For over 200 years, his family had controlled the spice trade throughout the Outer Rim territories. Their exotic seasonings commanded premium prices, and were considered the finest in the galaxy. Then humans showed up with their mild seasonings. The first human cook hired by a restaurant on Trader's Moon had casually sprinkled what she called basic black pepper onto a traditional Xanthari dish. The result was so flavorful that customers lined up for blocks to taste it. Other restaurants started bidding frantically for access to human spices. But there was a problem. When Galactic Food Safety inspectors analyzed the mild black pepper, their equipment registered readings that suggested industrial-grade chemical compounds. The gentle paprika that humans used on everyday meals required protective gloves to handle safely. Something called cayenne pepper had to be stored in sealed containment units. "They put this on their food regularly?" asked Inspector Gorvex, staring at the hazmat readings for what humans called medium salsa. "Every day," confirmed the human cook. "This batch is actually pretty mild. Wait until you try the hot stuff." Prince Phalanx watched his monopoly crumble, as restaurants across the galaxy demanded access to human seasonings. His premium exotic spices suddenly seemed bland and overpriced, compared to what humans casually sprinkled on children's food. But the real disruption came when humans started talking about terraforming trade. Commissioner Velith had been managing colonial development projects for decades. The galaxy had a standard list of habitable worlds, and a much longer list of impossible death worlds that no sane species would ever try to colonize. Then David Miller, a human terraforming specialist, walked into her office with a proposal that made her question reality. "We'd like to submit a bid for developing the burning wastes of Kethra," David said enthusiastically. Commissioner Velith stared at him. "The burning wastes? That system is classified as absolutely uninhabitable. The radiation levels would kill most species in minutes. The atmosphere is pure sulfuric acid. The surface temperature averages 500 degrees. David nodded eagerly. "Right. That's what makes it such an interesting challenge. We've handled worse conditions back on Earth." "Worse conditions?" "Oh, sure," David continued. "Earth has places like Death Valley, where temperatures reach similar levels. We've got areas with natural sulfuric acid springs that people actually visit as tourist attractions. And the radiation levels on Kethra are only about 3 times what our astronauts deal with regularly." Commissioner Velith felt dizzy. "You want to live there?" "Eventually, yeah. But first we'd need to do some basic terraforming. Nothing too complicated. Seed the atmosphere with some engineered bacteria to process the acid. Set up solar reflectors to bring the temperature down to a more comfortable level. Maybe add some magnetic field generators to handle the radiation. How long would this take? David consulted his tablet. For full terraforming, maybe 18 months. The sulfuric acid rain should clear up in about 6 months once we get the atmospheric processors running. The temperature management is just basic engineering. We've done similar projects on Mars. Within days, David's proposal was being studied by engineering teams across the galaxy. Worlds that had been written off as impossible for thousands of years were suddenly being evaluated as potential colony sites. Real estate markets went crazy. Planets that had been worthless became prime development opportunities. The Galactic Development Bank had to create entirely new categories for human habitable worlds. Other terraforming companies found themselves obsolete overnight. Projects that would have taken them centuries to complete, humans were offering to finish in months. The galaxy's economy restructured itself around a simple, terrifying realization. Problems that seemed impossible to everyone else were just interesting challenges to humans, and they were just getting started. 6 months had passed since humans first walked into the Galactic Council chambers, and everything had changed. The massive governmental body that had ruled peacefully for thousands of years now operated completely differently. Where once they had committees to study problems, debate solutions, and carefully plan responses over months or years, now they had a single emergency contact saved in their systems, called the humans. This new reality was about to be tested in the worst possible way. Deep space monitoring stations across the galaxies. Rim territories began picking up signals that made veteran operators go pale with fear. Ancient warning beacons, dormant for over 3,000 years, suddenly blazed to life with urgent emergency broadcasts. The Void Hunters have returned. Council Leader Nethys received the report in her private chambers at 0300 Galactic Standard Time. Her forehands trembled as she read the initial scout reports. Long-range sensors were detecting massive biomechanical ships emerging from dark space vessels that seemed to be alive, pulsing with their own heartbeats and warping reality around them as they moved. The Void Hunters were the galaxy's greatest nightmare. Ancient records described them as a force of pure destruction that had swept across half the known galaxy millennia ago, consuming entire star systems and leaving nothing but empty space behind. They had disappeared as suddenly as they had arrived, retreating into the dark void between galaxies. Now they were back. In the old days, this news would have triggered massive evacuation procedures. The council would have debated for weeks about which systems to abandon first, how to relocate billions of refugees, and whether any resistance was even possible. Entire species would have prepared to flee their homeworlds, hoping to outrun an enemy that had never been defeated. Instead, Council Leader Nethys did something that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. She placed a single communication. Call Admiral Harris. We need to talk. Admiral Jessica Harris arrived at the council chambers within hours, still wearing her Earth Fleet uniform with coffee stains on the sleeves. She looked like she'd been pulled directly from her ship's bridge, which she had been. The Admiral studied the tactical displays showing Void Hunter movements with the same expression someone might use while examining an interesting puzzle. Void Hunters, huh? Admiral Harris said, zooming in on images of the massive alien ships. Biomechanical construction, reality warping technology. Conquered half the galaxy before going dormant 3,000 years ago. She paused, then smiled. Sounds like fun. The council chamber fell silent. Representatives from hundreds of species stared at the human admiral, who had just described their greatest existential threat as fun. Admiral, Council Leader Nethys said carefully, you understand what we're facing. These entities have never been defeated. They destroyed civilizations that had been thriving for millions of years, right? But that was before, Admiral Harris replied. They never fought humans before. How many ships will you need for backup? Asked General Korvax from the Military Council. Admiral Harris looked genuinely confused. Backup? What for? To fight the Void Hunters, General Korvax explained. Oh, we don't need backup, Admiral Harris said casually. My fleet's been patrolling the Outer Rim for months now, and honestly, we've been getting pretty bored. The pirates all surrendered when they saw us coming, and there hasn't been a decent fight since we arrived. This actually sounds like a real challenge. Within hours, human warships were moving toward the Void Hunter incursion points. The rest of the galaxy watched in amazement and terror as Earth's fleet vessels charged directly toward enemies that had made entire civilizations flee in panic. The humans had built their warships the same way they built everything else, to survive impossible conditions. Their vessels could operate in environments that would destroy most galactic technology. More importantly, their crews had grown up on a world where everything was trying to kill them. So the idea of fighting reality-warping nightmare creatures from beyond the galaxy didn't particularly faze them. Contact with the enemy fleet in 30 minutes, reported Captain Tony Rodriguez from the bridge of the Earth vessel Determination. All ships report ready for engagement. Good, Admiral, Harris replied over the fleet communication system. Remember, these things have been terrorizing the galaxy for thousands of years. Let's show them what Deathworlders can do. The battle that followed became legendary across the galaxy. For the first time in recorded history, the Void Hunters encountered opponents who didn't retreat. Instead, human ships used tactics that no sane military strategist would approve, ramming biomechanical vessels, boarding enemy ships during combat, and using their own impossible technology to counter reality-warping attacks. The Void Hunters, who had never faced serious resistance, found themselves dealing with enemies who treated their terrifying presence as target practice. After 6 hours of combat, something unprecedented happened. The Void Hunter fleet, which had never retreated from any battle in galactic history, turned around and fled back into dark space. Admiral Harris's voice crackled over the communication channels. All ships, pursue and engage. Don't let them get comfortable out there. Human vessels chased the Void Hunters to the edge of the galaxy and beyond, making it clear that Earth's fleet would follow them anywhere they tried to hide. When the human ships finally returned, the galaxy had fundamentally changed once again. Species that had lived in fear of the Void Hunters for millennia realized they no longer had to worry about them. The monsters that had haunted their nightmares for thousands of years had been chased away by humans who treated the whole thing like an interesting training exercise. The Galactic Council updated their emergency protocols one final time. The new standard procedure for extinction-level threats was simple. Call the humans and get out of their way. The galaxy had learned that having Deathworlders as allies meant never having to face the impossible alone. When humans showed up, even the monsters that lived in the dark between stars decided it was time to find somewhere else to be. And across the galaxy, species that had spent their entire history running from threats they couldn't fight, finally learned what it felt like to be safe. Because now, they had humans watching their backs. The Deathworlders had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same.